Hi, my name's Matt with SNS Cycle. Welcome to the Proven Performance Podcast. I am joined today by Hunter and Jan from our emissions lab. We're going to talk about how you can make compliant power today, which I'm excited to learn and share more info about. So let's dive right in, guys. Let's get into it. So let's start off. What is an emissions lab? Let's start there for somebody who might not know.
Well, yeah, basically, we have a facility. We can run all the testing that's required by the EPA or the state of California in order to demonstrate that a motorcycle or aftermarket part is compliant. And it's complete all the equipment, meet all the government regulations. So it's basically just a test facility that's been recognized by the EPA and state of California as being able to perform testing to their standards.
And in that testing, is that like accumulation dyno? Is that like road testing with a computer on your lap? How do you actually run that testing?
It's all that. So the yeah, from the development side, there is times where we're riding there with the computer making changes to the bike, but when it comes to the
Allegedly.
actual certification testing, the yeah, it's running on a motorcycle on a chassis dyno, and our whole goal is to simulate the operation of that vehicle that would happen in the real world, but on a dyno in a controlled environment, so that we can do that testing repeatably. And all the EPA regulations and the specifications for that test performs. We put a motorcycle on the dyno set up so that it simulates the mass of the vehicle and its aerodynamic drags. We have a pre-described route that we have to follow. And when we drive the motorcycle over that, the dyno loads the vehicle to its mass, its aerodynamic drag, and the motorcycle thinks it's going down the highway. We even have a road speed fan that puts air to the motorcycle equal to how fast it's traveling, up to 70 mile an hour. So, when a motorcycle is running 70 mile an hour in the lab, there's 70 mile an hour air blowing across the lab, blowing stuff everywhere. And the bike thinks it's just going down the highway, and it does. Under all those conditions, we measure the emissions and ensure that it meets all the standards. And then it also does require the durability testing side of it. We do in the lab itself for the emissions testing lab. That's where we verify the emissions. We also have dynos to age components. We have to show components in motorcycles meet emissions not only when they're new, but at the end of the vehicle's life. The EPA specifies a useful life for a motorcycle, and we have to be able to show that meet emissions for that complete useful life cycle. And to do that, we run another 3 dynos for durability, where we just put motorcycles on, drive them with a robot, and they run a pre-described route that simulates average use of a motorcycle over its lifetime, including starts and stops, idle periods, wide open accelerations, and just several different cruise speeds on there as well. And we're just simulating the life of the motorcycle just on a dyno. We run it 12 hours a day continuously just to wear stuff out so we can show emissions of compliance at full useful life.
Wow. I'm envisioning like a really cool Peloton bike, but with a motorcycle.
Yep.
It's really a motorcycle that has about 40,000 miles on the back end and 0 miles on the front end.
Real easy on front tires.
Oh yeah, they all still have the little rubber dinghies on the front, and the rears of the bikes are just destroyed.
Oof. And when we get to mileage accumulations, I've seen some things where, like you were just saying, Jan, that it's really the lifetime of the motorcycle. So that's not like just for lack of a better term, the guy that buys a new motorcycle every 2 years and wants to keep everything pretty stock. I don't want to throw a bunch at it. You can make actual real power with a compliant tune. That's real?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's we're trying to develop performance parts, and we get those performance parts have to the durability last the useful life of the motorcycle, which EPA considers is only 30,000 miles or 5 years, just due to the number of performance bikes that get crashed. They bring down the average. We know most Harleys survive a lot longer than that, though. So we have to ensure our parts and products survive for that full useful life. But yeah, and we're trying to make power and performance with it. So and it's not just tuning. It's the catalyst, the shape and size of the catalyst, the location of it, the design of the exhaust system it goes in. It's the design of the camshafts that we're doing in, and the calibration involved with those. It's it's everything has to work together as a package, and none of it is a restriction on power or performance side if done correctly.
Okay. That's really interesting because I'm in a lot of the Facebook groups like everyone else, and everyone says, "Oh, you've got a catalytic converter. Oh, it's a compliant bike. Oh, it's never going to do this and that. It's never going to perform. It's never going to hit a number." Stuff like that. But we prove on the daily that that's not actually true.
Yeah, it's we're our performance catalyst exhaust system. You put it on a motorcycle, it'll perform just as well or better than all the competitor systems out there. On that bike, it comes down to how much air you can flow, and a properly sized and designed catalyst. It's not the restriction in the system. And yes, there are motorcycle or exhaust systems out there with catalysts that are, but none of the S&S systems are that way. And I mean, if you go to like an OE level, Dodge is making Hellcat 700 horsepower. They're flowing through multiple catalysts in that exhaust and able to do that. And we're just dealing with a motorcycle that's maybe 150 horse or more. It's easy if you design the parts correctly, set them up right. We can do it.
Yeah.
And Jan touched on an important part there, which our industry is a little behind the four-wheeled industry for compliant power. I mean, you can walk down to pick your favorite brand dealership and buy any vehicle with 500 plus horsepower that's fully street legal, has a several tens of thousands of miles warranty, and it's faster than anything you could have built in the 90s, completely illegally built in the 90s. So yeah, we're as an industry, we're a little bit behind the technology curve of where the four-wheel guys are at.
Yeah, and we're seeing that change basically every year too, right?
Yeah.
Kind of playing catch up, so to speak. On the idea of keeping compliant outside of abiding by federal regulations or California carbon compliancy or other states that are on the compliancy wagon, is there a reason to keep your motorcycle compliant?
Warranty. And if you start modifying things, putting race only parts on there, I mean that's not going to be covered under warranty for your vehicle. Where anything that's a CARB EO or a compliant product that's designed for that vehicle for on street use, it should not impact your warranty.
Really? And that's part of that making performance, keeping compliant, but that won't affect your warranty either. That's really good information.
Right. And actually, it'd be good to point out that is protected by federal law under the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act that it was in I believe it was in the 70s, mid 70s when that was enacted. And some manufacturers still try to get around it and say that, that's not a insert your favorite brand aftermarket part, so we're not going to honor your warranty. But it is protected under law that if you put compliant parts on your bike, that you're covered under warranty.
Which is great information to have for anyone who has a motorcycle.
Everybody should remember that if they're interested.
Absolutely. When we talk about compliant parts, are we limited to air cleaners and exhausts, and that's kind of all I can change there, or can we actually get into the engine with compliancy?
Oh, you can get into the engine. S&S, we have a performance cam, comes with the cam and the calibration, and you can do that chain drive or upgrade to the gear drive cams with that as well. We have the inmate breathers, your breathers that's actually part of the emissions control system because it's controlling crankcase emissions from the engine. We have CARB EOs on the breathers. And you can get into the big bore and displacement kits as well. Our 136 is emissions compliant, and we have proved it's compliant for the full useful life of the motorcycle. So if you're installing that, engine into one of the bikes, we say it's compliant in, and install the calibration we provide with it into that bike will pass emissions for its full useful life with that motor and make a tremendous amount of power doing it.
Yeah, that's a serious motor.
Another one that we're compliant on.
Wow.
So,
and
you can get in there.
With the emissions lab, are we running strictly our stuff? It's locked down. It's super secret sauce back there. You can't see it. We don't talk about it. We will not tell you where our CARB EOs live or anything like that. Or is that all kind of public facing?
It's public information, and we help out anybody that wants to do testing, anyone that's looking to get into compliance. And S&S, we built our lab in 2007, and since 2008 we have been doing testing for other OEM vehicle manufacturers for both complete certifications of their vehicles, and then helping some OEMs with some of their aftermarket components as well and some of their kits. And then we've done testing and helped out some of our competitors as well. It's anyone that's wants testing done, we're willing to help. There's a charge and a cost associated with that, but we offer an emissions testing facility and service. So they can send us a vehicle, or if it's a performance part for a Harley, we may likely have the motorcycle they need here already, and they could rent that from us and use it for the testing. So they only need to send us the product. And with our experience, with knowing, we've been doing carb EOs. SNS has had our first carb EO at SNS Cycle was in 1994. And we currently have over 105 EOs on aftermarket products. And we've supported many OEMs with getting EOs on their motorcycles, and OEMs that have used an SNS engine in their own production motorcycles. So we have experience both from the complete vehicle side and the aftermarket side, understand how EPA and CARB work, and by working with SNS, we can provide someone expertise on, this is the testing that you're going to need to do. This is the motorcycle you're going to need to test it on. And that's what these are the vehicles that it'll then cover. And we know that based on our work that we do regularly with the EPA and CARB, and we work together with those agencies on a lot of different projects.
Wow. How many facilities can we say do that? Is that pretty common? Like, do a lot of companies have that, or
no, so
rare?
Our competition, there are about 6 labs that we compete against, for testing. Now there's also, Harley has their own lab that they only do their own work in. Indian Motorcycle, they have their own lab. They only allow to do their own work in. But we're the only aftermarket parts manufactured company that owns its own lab. And
Really?
that lab is open to the public for anyone to have a component tested in. So that's a unique experience to SNS.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, Jan, you had mentioned something that I've been playing slightly dumb. I know a little bit about compliance, but for conversational purposes, you had mentioned that our first carb EO was in the 90s.
Yeah.
Compliancy doesn't only apply to 17 and later M8 model.
No.
Like, I have to worry about that on my twin cam or my Evo in my garage.
Oh yeah, everything. It applies to everything going all the way back to when the Clean Air Act was put up in the 70s. And that was an act.
So my shovelhead chopper was compliant at some point when it was new.
Well, anything on a motorcycle, anything built after 1980 is required to, or 1978 is required to meet an emission standard. So any vehicle since the first standards were set has been certified to a compliant standard. Now, the early compliant standards, they were pretty low. The regulations the limits were pretty high. Not a lot of regulation. Right away they got rid of the open crankcase breathers, so you had to have crankcase ventilation system
out on the ground.
You saw those go away first on the early bikes. The external chain oilers went away. It was blowing crankcase gases out on the chains. That all went away. Right away.
Yeah.
And emissions limits started, and you started to see the limits then ratchet down through the 90s and the early 2000s, and now limits have been really stable since the mid 2000s. Since about 2005, regulations have not really changed. There is some potential for it to change in the future. Some countries have actually surpassed the U.S. now for emission regulations. Regulations in the EU overseas. Similar testing, but the limits are a lot lower and require a lot cleaner motorcycles than they do here. And California is looked into, going towards that sort of standard. So, at some point in the future, probably not going to happen within the next 4 years anyways. We do expect to see some change in the regulations. But right now everything's pretty stable, and, but we're still seeing the technology of the motorcycles advance.
Absolutely.
With getting cleaner and cleaner, and more electronic controls on them. Throttle by wire on most motorcycles is pretty common now. And a lot of that is done for emissions control so that they can control emissions and still have the performance.
And Jane, you mentioned something really interesting there. So the EU has their own set of standards. Can we test that also?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. SNS, we've actually partnered with IDIADA in Spain, and we know and understand all EU regulations, and I can run the EU testing here to demonstrate that a component is compliant for the EU.
Wow. And is that something that we offer to the outside industry as a whole as well? Like, if, say, a competitor were to call us and say, hey, we're trying to ship to Spain, can you help us? That's something we do?
Yep. We certainly can. We can perform the testing based on our partnership with Idiata. It still has to be done for the approval through Idiata, but we can perform the testing for it here.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then I kind of want to circle back to something we said earlier, and Hunter, this might be more in your ballpark. We had talked about how exhausts being designed intentionally and where the cat is placed inside it affects the compliancy factor. That's something that you guys take into consideration. We're not just making 2-in-1s that look really cool.
Yeah, luckily, at least in your specific case of the 2-in-1, they all kind of need to be right in about the same spot. So yeah, the first couple times we did it, it was a lot of work, and then we kind of know now, like, okay, everything's got to be right about here. Let's try to work our lengths in, and then probably trying to make it look cool part is probably third on the list. But yeah, it was a struggle coming from a world of doing only race only type exhaust to doing compliant, but I don't know. We figured it out pretty quick. Between the emissions team and the exhaust team, we got it figured out all right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we talked to the 2-in-1, they're all kind of the same. In a traditional dual setup, is the cat in a different location than a 2-in-1?
Yeah, they generally are, and it'll require different precious metals on the catalyst, depending on temperatures and a host of other things.
Okay. And is that something like it lives in the header? It lives in the muffler itself? Does it depend model to model?
So right now we are exclusively putting them in the mufflers. We haven't played around too much with putting them in the headers, other than like some prototype testing we've done with it. But we've had pretty good success with the locations in the mufflers for right now.
Awesome. There's a couple of other things that I kind of want to get into with you guys, just again, from my understanding. So compliancy factors apply to internals, externals, exhausts. I feel like the thing that we hear the most about compliancy, at least that I hear out and about at rallies and in the Facebook groups and things like that, is the catalytic converter. Is that a real, I'll call it a showstopper? Like if I want to do, or if I have the ability to do these internal components that are compliant, that cat's going to handle whatever I can throw at it that is compliant because we specifically choose one that is made correctly or is set up right? Whatever correct terminology there is there. Can you kind of lead me in the right direction there?
There's a ton, like, it's a good question, but it's a very complex question. And Jan and I have been on the receiving end of tech calls for this type of question several times. The first thing I would say is that yes, our catalyst will handle pretty much anything you can throw at it compliant. However, what ends up happening in the real world from time to time is we will get a customer that will buy a compliant system and then try to put a non-compliant camshaft in his setup, and then a non-compliant tune.
So a compliant pipe with a 590 isn't a good combo.
Correct. Compliant pipe with a 590 and a Power Vision tune from your favorite local tuner is generally bad news.
Okay.
So it's real bad news.
That sounds like spoken from I've seen bad things happen.
We've seen some very terrible things. So overlap and duration is a big problem with catalysts. If you get that out of whack, you are going to throw raw fuel at your catalyst, and it's going to burn and burn and burn until the cat melts up into a little ball and comes out the back.
Like physically actually removes itself from.
Yes. And that is not a warranty type deal. That is misuse. The other thing that we've seen that Jan and I, we talk about all the time, and we warn people constantly about this. If you go to a dyno shop and they put a compliant exhaust on and they pull out the copper tube sniffer and stick it in the back of the pipe and try to do a tune, run, get out of there as fast as you can, because that is going to be very, very, very bad news.
Really?
Yeah, the catalyst is in there to clean up the emissions, which is changing what the properties are of that exhaust. And if they're trying to read your air fuel ratio behind the catalyst, what they're reading is not what's coming out of the engine. And, you get people that, they try to do a quick tune on a bike, and I'm not opposed to tuning on a bike, and you can make improvements on a compliant motorcycle. With tuning, the manufacturers, when they produce a bike, they have to deal with all the tolerances that can happen in production, tolerances in the injectors, the sensors, the engines, all that. And, having a tune done specifically from your bike, it's, there can be some benefit in that. However, that tune, if it is done improperly, it's going to cause significant problems. And
really? So you can actually
trying to read that AFR.
Wow. Yeah. So that's something you never hear people say.
Yeah. And I mean, heck, even good tuners can make mistakes on stuff like this, because if you don't know what you don't know. And if it's your first go around with a cat and you're trying to do that, it's problems. And like Jan said, yeah, a tune is great if done properly.
That very important asterisk, if done.
Yeah, and now that being said, any of our exhausts, any of our air cleaners, unless explicitly specified, and if we do this, it would come with a tune, it comes with a Power Vision, whatever it may be, but it's done on a stock motorcycle, stock tune, stock calibration for the life of the motorcycle.
So, and that's specifically our 4950 state versions that are essentially a plug and play option.
Yep, that is correct. And those have room to grow too with other modifications.
And would we ever launch something that I don't believe that I've seen it, but is there an option where we only make a 50 state, or we only make a race only setup that's not specifically made in the shop for a racer who is on the track?
Well, we do some of our systems, like our championship systems that match up to what they're doing on the race bikes. It gives you that look and, that sound, of the performance, what you see on like the King of the Bagger race bikes. Yeah. We offer those type of systems, as a compliant offering, that it gives you, the performance, and it works with the stock bike, so that everything's compliant.
Which is huge. Not only the compliancy, but also actually will work after you bolt it on still.
Especially with the farther we get along and with newer bikes, the less ability people have to tune and mess with the ECM. I
have seen that, yeah. And I'm the thing that I've heard about our champion and our qualifier pipes for the challengers is, man, I really love the setup. It doesn't have anything that I don't want, and I'm so glad that it's in a compliant factor, because it means I can bolt it onto my bike and I don't have to search the internet and hope somebody can tune this somewhere.
Right.
I know it just runs.
And actually those two pipes specifically, the short qualifier, championship qualifier, and then the long qualifier that we just released, those pipes rip. They rip on a stock bike. They're so good. I dare anybody to have a non-catalyst race only pipe that does better than those on an otherwise stock bike. They work.
That's awesome. Look, guys, I really appreciate it. I don't want to take any more of your time out of the day than I absolutely have to, as I know you guys are both really busy too. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today and to talk compliancy on the Proven Performance podcast. I really appreciate it.